Hi everyone and welcome back to another video for Phantasy Star Online to New Genesis. In today's video we're just going to be looking back at NGS and just giving an overall impression of the game, almost like a bit of a review. So NGS has been out for a little while now. I think we've had the second anniversary for it. And I just wanted to sort of give an overview of how I feel the game's changed since launch, sort of an honest impression of how I feel about the game, areas that can improve on, areas that I think it's doing well in. The reason for doing this video is there has been a lot of videos online recently, and I feel quite a few of them have been quite unfair to the game. Now, I want to preface this and say that I'm not being sponsored by SEGA or anything for this. I just want to do an honest impression of the game, where I feel it currently stands, and I will highlight the faults where there are faults, and there are faults with it. So just to give an impression, I just want to let you guys know why I'm doing this overall. So as I said, there are a few videos going around at the moment, and a lot of them are very, very harsh against the game. And having watched a few of them, I do feel like some of them are a little bit unnecessarily unfair towards it. And I feel that the game kind of deserves a review from what I consider to be a balanced perspective. Now, obviously, my balanced perspective might be completely different to someone else's. I appreciate that everyone's got different biases. But I just want to give my overall impressions, just so you can maybe get a better idea of how the game is. Now, before I go ahead with the actual review, I wanted to give a quick background of my involvement with the Phantasy Star series in the past. So I've been playing Phantasy Star Online games for a hell of a long time now. I started with the franchise in about 2003 with the GameCube version of PSO. Since then, I've played through GameCube PSO, I've played PSO Blue Burst, I got to level 200 in Blue Burst, so I played that a hell of a lot. I've played PSO Episode 3, the card game on the GameCube. I have played Phantasy Star Universe and its expansion. I've played all of the portable games apart from Nova. I played the Japanese version of PSO2 from the alpha test, so I played that for about 8 years, and now I'm playing NGS. So I've got quite an extensive background in Phantasy Star, in particular Phantasy Star Online anyway. So I'd like to think I've got a good idea of where to base a review on, because I can see why they've made some decisions the way they have. So at the moment, there is this perception with the community with NGS that it is a downgrade of PSO2. So I think the reason that a lot of people believe it's a downgrade is because of the perceived lack of content. That I do have a bit of a problem with. So at launch, it's no secret that NGS, when it launched, was a bit of a disaster. When it launched, there were several problems with the servers. It was incredibly laggy. You could barely even play. And to be blunt, there was next to nothing to do in the game. It was awful, really. There was really not much to do. You only had Alio. You only had a couple of combat zones. And you essentially just rinsed and repeated the same thing every single day. There was nothing really to do. The emergency quests really weren't worth doing. And there was nothing to really hunt either as well. It was a bit of a waste of time, really. I think I played for the first couple of months, and I got so tired of it that I ended up quitting the game, and I just stopped playing for a few months. So I'm not going to deny that when the game launched, it was an absolute disaster. I think SEGA couldn't have messed up the launch much more, really, to be honest. It was terrible. However, I think a lot of the reviews of NGS still sort of come from that same mindset, and I feel that a lot of them are very unfair to the current state of the game. Now, I'm not going to defend the game for everything, because there are a lot of faults still with the game, and I still feel it has a lot of areas to improve on. So, at the moment, let's go into the current state of NGS as it stands now in July 2023. So we've just had the version 2 update a few weeks back, which added things like the creative space and so on. So that's what we're basing it on currently. So let's try and break this down a little bit. So the first area I want to look at is the story. So I've seen quite a few people complaining that the story of NGS is very basic, that there's nothing really to it. And to be honest, I do kind of agree on that. particularly for the first few chapters of story in NGS, nothing really happens. You know, your character wakes up on Alpha, coming out of an escape pod. You meet Aina and later Manon, and you find that you're on this planet called Alpha, which has been attacked by these enemies called dolls. And that is essentially all it really gives you for the first few chapters. You know, you learn about the other regions like Ritem and Kavaris, but most of the first few chapters of the story is just this effort to try and build central canon to repel Dark Faults. But you don't really know why Dark Faults is there. You don't know much about the dolls, really. You don't know anything really about Planet Alpha. It's very, very basic, and it really doesn't give much away at all. I feel that started to change with chapter 5, where you go to Lucille. So with Lucille, this will be spoilers for anyone who hasn't done story. So if you haven't done story, you might just want to skip this part and check back in later. But in chapter 5, you learn about this new enemy called the Starless, and you essentially find out that the dolls were made by a person called Zepheto to train arcs to fight the Starless. And in chapter 6, we start to see the Starless get introduced to Alpha. So we're starting to get a few Starless enemies pop up here and there. So I feel now the game is starting to sort of slowly get into its stride with the story. I still think the story is quite weak overall. And it's kind of hard to say, but I feel that after this amount of time, we should have more progress in the story than we do. So I will agree with the criticism of story. I don't think it's great. There are the little side stories you can do as well, but a lot of them are pretty much irrelevant. You might get a little bit of story information that you wouldn't have got elsewhere, but for the most part, the side stories are fairly irrelevant. Now, compared to other games, this is where it gets interesting because, to be honest, Phantasy Star Online games have never had much of a story. Even the original PSO, the story, you don't really get told the story in the original PSO. For anyone who hasn't played the original PSO, because I realise it is a very old game now, the majority of the story in the original PSO comes from message capsules that are left by people who've been on the planet before you. You don't really get told a whole lot at all, and it's left up to the player interpretation to kind of figure out what's going on. It reminds me a little bit of things like Dark Souls, where a lot of the lore is explained through items. It was the same in PSO. A lot of the lore is described through items and through these message capsules as well. We have moved on from that a bit now. We are told the story more directly now. But I still don't feel like story's ever been a strong point of the Phantasy Star Online series. For what it's worth, I do like the story of the original PSO, but it is very, very minimal. So I feel that the story concerns are justified, but I also feel that it's kind of par for the course with Phantasy Star, really. So next thing I want to cover is the combat. Now, this seems to be one of the biggest sticking points I've seen with NGS reviews. A lot of people give the game a lot of flack for having what they describe as a very basic combat system. Now, it's an interesting one, this for me, because I understand it to an extent. I appreciate that in PSO2, you obviously had a lot more classes, and there was a lot more photon art, and I mean a lot more. Each weapon probably had like 15 or so photon art, if not more. It was crazy. And yes, that allowed you to customize how you played a lot, which was cool. But I think what a lot of people forget about the PSO2 combat system, as in original PSO2, is that of those photon art or techniques, a huge, huge amount of them were completely pointless to use, because you'd always have a couple of them that were incredibly overpowered. An example I can think of is with the katana. So when katana first launched in episode 2 of PSO, and again, people might not know this if they've only played the global version. I've obviously played the Japanese version for 8 years, so I was there when episode 2 got added. When episode 2 and Braver got added, with katana, a little bit down the line, they added a photon art called, I think it was called Shunka Shunran. And that photon art was way, way stronger than anything else that Katana had, and it was completely pointless using anything else. So all you had was Bravers spamming Shunka constantly, despite them having other photon arts. That then got replaced later on by another one called Guren Tessen, which was a transport PA that you could use to get around quickly. So all you would have every quest is Bravers spamming this photon art to get as far ahead as they could, and then they would essentially just spam that photon art. And you find that with a lot of weapons. For most weapons, you had it where there were a couple of weapons that, a couple of photon arts that were worth using, and everything else was just a complete waste of time. With NGS, what they've done, they've simplified the photon arts quite a lot. So each weapon now, I can actually show you this now. So if I go to my katana and go to the photon art, there are only 4. You've got weapon action as well, which is essentially your guard, but you only have 4 photon arts, which is a massive decrease since the original PSO2. However, each of the photon art is used in massively different ways. And what they've tend to do in NGS is the photon arts tend to be able to be adjusted depending on how you use them. So with katana, for example, if you repeatedly use the same photon art, it has like 3 different variants that it'll use, so it'll cycle through them. So if I use Silverleaf Storm, it'll do... In fact, I'll actually show you this for anyone who's not familiar with it. So if I just go out here... Hopefully there's not a Gigantix in my face. Nope, that's good. So if I use Silverleaf Storm, the first press of it just does a few quick slashes. You can see if I keep just pressing that, it just does a few quick slashes. If I press it twice though, it does another 2 slashes, but it's a different animation. And then if I do a full 3, it ends with that kind of round slash. And it's the same for all of the katana photon arts, so they all vary depending on how many times you press the button. There are other weapons that have different uses of the photon art if you do it from a neutral position or if you do it with a direction held. So there is some nuance to it. I appreciate they also added that in PSO2 vanilla as well with some of the advanced classes. I think the advantage of the NGS system is that because you've only got a few photon arts, there are less useless ones. Now, yes, there are still a few that are completely pointless to use. You will find there are some you just never really use. So it hasn't rectified the problem altogether. But I do feel like the simplification of the photon art system is an improvement overall. Just because of the amount of redundant photon art that there was in the original game. However, I will say it would be nice to have maybe a couple more, just to give us a bit more flexibility with our photon art. Because at the moment, you can see each weapon can use essentially 4 photon arts, so you can put them all on the same weapon at the minute. It would be nice if we had like a couple more, just so we could, mix up our combinations a little bit. But I don't think it needs to go as ridiculous as the original PSO2 did. In regards to the actual combat, I think that my only real criticism of the combat overall would be that the game is too easy. There isn't much challenge in the game, to be honest. The only real challenge in the game at the moment, there's the Gigantix, which the Gigantix do hit really, really hard, but everything is super telegraphed in NGS, so you can predict a lot of the attacks very easily. So I wouldn't say they're challenging by any means. There's not many enemies that actually do pose much of a challenge. Even the latest Urgent Quest boss, based on Zafeto, that's not that hard, really. But I do feel like there needs to be a little bit of an uptick in the difficulty. I know they have added things like the dual quests, but the dual quests are... they're another problem, to be honest. I will just quickly cover these, actually. So the dual quests are a one-on-one boss quest, where you have 5 minutes to kill the boss, and the boss has massively boosted attack, and you can't revive. And what they've done is they added these special capsules you can add to your weapons or armor that give you big boosts while you're in dual quests. The problem is, it means that there's no point really doing dual quests without them, and I don't like that. That to me is a terrible decision, and so I'm hoping they change that in the future. But overall, I think the combat is reasonably good. I think there are definitely weapons that do need improvements. For example, I think that the launcher for Ranger needs work. What else? I'm trying to think. Me personally, I don't like the double saber for fighter, but I know that some people really like that, so maybe that's just a case of me not liking that weapon. I do feel like there is a little bit of work needed to some of the weapons, but overall I think it's pretty good. So next area I want to cover is the amount of content. So this was probably the biggest problem with NGS when it launched. As I've said, when it launched, there was next to nothing to do. It was ridiculous how little content there was. That still is a complaint in a lot of videos that I'm seeing online, about NGS currently. A lot of these videos still say there's nothing to do. It's got way less to do than PSO2 vanilla. And I have a problem with that because when you're comparing this to PSO2 vanilla, you have to bear in mind that PSO2 vanilla was 8 years worth of content. I realise it was rushed out for the global audience, and maybe people who haven't played the Japanese version don't know that, but what was added for PSO2 in the West was 8 years worth of content from the Japanese servers. So you're taking a game that's been out for 8 years of updates, and it had regular updates every few weeks. So you have 8 years worth of updates, and you're comparing it to a game that's been out for, what, is it 2 years for NGS now? Now, do I think NGS needs more content? Yeah, it probably does need a bit more. But I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. Particularly now, you've got 4 different areas. You've got Elio, you've got Retem, you've got Caveris, you've got Steer. You've got a decent amount of urgent quests. I think there should be some more. And I also don't agree with what they've done recently, which is to take some of them out of rotation. I think that you should be keeping them in rotation just so we've got a bit more to do. But I do feel that it's less of an issue than some people are making it out to be. You've got your daily quests, you've got your weekly quests. At the moment, we've got some really interesting limited quests as well. We had the Sonic event recently. We've got the weird quiz quest at the moment, which is completely different to anything we've had before. But I just don't feel it's totally fair comparing it to an 8-year-old game that's had 8 years of content. Now, yes, I realise there's always going to be that comparison because you are comparing, one PSO2 to another PSO2. And it's no surprise that, NGS was meant to be the next sort of evolution of PSO2. And a lot of people are seeing it as a backstep because of the reduction in content. But I just feel that comparing it to a game that's had 8 years worth of content isn't necessarily fair. I think what you want to do really is, if you want to make it fair, is compare NGS's current state to how original PSO2 was 2 years in on the Japanese side. Now, offhand, I can't remember what Japanese PSO2 had after 2 years. I would guess maybe episode 1, 2, perhaps episode 3, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Now, if you were back playing Japanese PSO2 in those days, to be honest, there wasn't a huge amount to do then either. There was probably more than NGS, I'll give it that. But it's not this huge chasm that people claim it to be. And I do feel like NGS is improving a lot as well. One area I have noticed with NGS is that it seems to be diversifying different activities for people. So what I mean by that is, if you don't like the combat as much in NGS, you've got areas like the creative space. The creative space you could potentially spend hundreds of hours in because it is really expansive. And we are getting more to that when we get the Retem editions. So, if you're wanting to look into the creative side, you've got all that to look into. There's obviously the fashion side of things people do as well, which to me is better than ever in NGS. I think the actual fashion side of things, creating a character that really represents what you want, I think is one of the best character creators in any game I've seen. Base PSO2's character creation was really, really good for the time. I think NGS has just stepped that up a bit. So I think that some of that criticism of NGS is a bit unfounded. I do feel it does need more content. I'm not going to deny that overall, but I do feel that we need to be looking at it objectively and comparing it to how Japanese PSO2 was 2 years in. And that is a better comparison in my opinion. I really, really disagree with this, comparing it to 8 years worth of content. So next thing I want to do is a bit of a comparison to the original PSO2 actually. So what I want to look into is just some areas of the games and just comparing the two. So obviously we've already touched on the story and the combat. So next thing I want to look into is just actual visually. So if we look at PSO2 NGS, Again, I've seen a few reviews recently saying that NGS doesn't look as good as original PSO2, and I'm sorry, but I cannot take that seriously. In fact, I might be able to show this actually. Because I couldn't believe it when I saw reviews saying that NGS doesn't look as good as PSO2. So this is NGS that I've been in currently. How about... let's transfer to original PSO2. Actually, no, we can't because I need to download it. Never mind. What I might do is I may... To be honest, if you look on my channel, there's several original PSO2 videos on there. Just look at those, watch some of those videos, or any creator that's an original PSO2, then come back and watch NGS again. I'm sorry, but there is no comparison in the visual difference between the two. NGS is far, far better looking than original PSO2 was, and the reason for that's just because of the age of the game. Again, original PSO2 is an 8-year-old game that was just updated over time. And for its time, it looked alright. It looked pretty good. But NGS, it's just a step above graphically. Again, I'm not trying to sort of, get on Sega's good side or anything. I genuinely feel that NGS is a much nicer looking game overall. And I think part of that is the fact that you've got the big open maps as well. I mean, to me, this is quite a nice looking game. It's not fantastic, but it looks, this looks pretty good to me. Overall, I think comparing this to original PSO2, while original PSO2 had a certain charm to it, and I think that it looked reasonably good for its age, I just genuinely do not feel it compares to this. I just don't see where people are getting that from. You also have to bear in mind with NGS as well that you've also got the option of running it. You can have it cell shaded if you want to for your character, or you can have it more realistic. I tend to run it cell shaded because I actually think it looks quite cool. But I just don't get this criticism of the way NGS looks. I think it looks fine. If you want to talk sort of visual issues with NGS, I would say that there are some issues with, for example, PSE bursts. So when you have a PSE burst, sometimes there is so much going on the screen that you literally can't see anything because there's so many particle effects and things going off. That was also a problem in original PSO2 as well, but there was an option to sort of reduce the particle effects of other players. I think you can do that in NGS as well, but to me it just seems a bit worse in NGS that. I also feel that this isn't necessarily a graphical thing, but I do feel that there is some laziness with NGS graphically. So, for example, at the moment we've got this anniversary event on, and you can see Central City's got all these decorations up, which looks very nice. But then if I go to, for example, the Caveris camp, so you come to Caveris camp and there's absolutely nothing to suggest that there's an anniversary event on. And SEGA also have made it so that the anniversary enemies only appear in earlier. And I think that's really short-sighted. I think that for events like this, the seasonal events, I think it should be enemies all over the world that you can fight, so that you can choose where to fight. You also have to bear in mind that some people are still getting through story and might not have unlocked some of the areas yet. So you're essentially... I get that you're choosing earlier because it's the first area, so anyone can access it. But if someone's going through Route 10 in the story, do they really want to be coming back over to Elio to do the seasonal events and then go back to Route 10 to do story? I just feel it should be a worldwide thing where any enemies in the world are seasonal. And I also feel that the other camp should be decorated a bit as well. I just think it's a little bit disappointing that you only get the decorations in Central City, and it's not just for this event either, it's for every single one, even major events like Christmas and things like that. It's only ever Central City that gets it, which I think is a bit of a shame. I'll just go back to Central. So I do feel like there are some areas that are definitely improvements over original PSO2, and there are some areas that are downgrades as well. So another area I've seen some complaints about is the Axe Cache Scratch, which is the gacha system in PSO2. And this has been in since original PSO2. It's not new to NGS. So I've seen some videos saying that they feel that the gacha system is predatory. I would wholeheartedly disagree with that. I am by no means a fan of gacha games. I try to avoid them as much as I can. The only other game I play with the gacha system is Nikke. I genuinely don't like gacha games. But I will say that for a gacha, NGS's I feel is quite fair. So you can see with this gacha here, you can play it once for 200 Axe Cache, or you can play 12 times for 2200. So that it's not the cheapest gacha in the world, 2200 Axe Cache. I'm trying to think how much that is for me at the moment. I want to say it's a little bit under $20, but I'm not 100% sure. Around there anyway. So that in itself, it's not the cheapest gacha in the world to do, admittedly. But there are several things that it does to make it a bit more comfortable. So the first thing is there are gifts for what are called scratch count bonuses. So you can see, if I do this scratch, after using it 5 times, and that's not 5 2200 pulls, that's 5 like individual pulls. After 5 pulls, the game will give you 5 yellow battle triggers. After 10 pulls, you'll get an enhancement success rate 100%. And you keep getting these rewards the more you pull. You can even get things like motion actions. So after 35 times, you unlock this Star Rising glide. And then you get the dash for it at 45. Now, yeah, that's a lot of pulls, but it's a free item they're throwing in. But the best thing about this is it has a really, really good pity system. So after 30 pulls, you unlock this thing called, for this scratch, it's called the DE Dreams July 23 ticket. It changes based on the scratch name. But this ticket, essentially, what you do is you hand it in, and it allows you to pick any item from that scratch and just unlock it. So even if you do 30 pulls and you say you're after a certain hairstyle and you think, after 30 pulls you don't get the hair, and you're obviously not happy because you've put a lot of money at the scratch and you've got nothing back. Well, at least then the game goes, here, have a ticket, you can unlock it. Now, there is a flip side to that in the fact that a lot of items need you to unlock them twice to unlock for all your characters, which I really hate. I detest that. Especially for expensive things like hairstyles. Having to get 2 of the same hairstyles so you can unlock it for everyone is obscene. I really don't like that. But I do think it helps at least that it gives you these tickets to give you the option of unlocking things that you want to get. And you can see it's not just at 30, so you get at 30, you get it again at 60, and then once you've done 60 pulls, you go on this smaller cycle here, where just every 30 pulls you get another ticket. The other way that it's quite good to you with the gacha is, and this only applies to the Axe Cache gacha, it doesn't apply to the Star Gems one. Star Gems one, I would personally not put money into. I would just use the free Star Gems that you get. I don't feel it's worth putting money into the Star Gem scratch. The Axe Cache one, the great thing about the Axe Cache one is everything, and I mean everything that's in the scratch, you can sell in your player shop. So anything you get that you don't want to use, you just sell it in your player shop and you can make a load of Mazetta back from it. So you can earn the in-game currency back and, make your characters more wealthy in-game by selling the things you don't want, which I think is a really, really good idea. You can also recycle some of the items in the recycle shop as well. So it gives you options with what to do. Yeah, so as an example, I'll pull once on this, for example, and I'll show you. So I'll pull once. So I've got some female cast arms. Now for those, I've got a female cast, so I'll use them. But say, for example, if I didn't have a female cast, I would just put those in my shop. So before I actually use those, now I know some people will say yes, but you've only got the free shop. You've only got the shop if you've got premium. But with the mission pass, one of the rewards you get from it is a 3-day shop pass. So all you would do in that case, if you wanted to stay free to play, you would just save up any money that you'd spent on scratches if you were going to spend a bit on scratches. And then whenever you want to sell anything, just use your 3-day pass and sell everything then.
Welcome.
So you can see, so if I go run personal shop and put items up for sale, I can sell those arms that I've just got. And those arms at the moment they only sell for like 399,000, which is not much. So based on that, I'd probably just use them because that's not a great deal of money. But there are some items that sell for a lot. So for example, I recently sold the Motoko Kusanagi hair from the Ghost in the Shell scratch because I've got a hairstyle that looks very, very similar to it. And as nice as that is, it was worth a ton of money in the player shop. So I sold it for 7.3 million. So you can see you can make a decent amount of money from selling things that are in the scratch. So I feel overall the scratch is quite fair. Yes, it is quite expensive, but you are at least going to make money on your characters with things that you don't want. And you've also got those pity scratch bonuses as well. So I do feel like it's it's quite good to you overall. Especially in comparison to some other scratches or some other gachas. So for example in Nikkei, which is another gacha game, with that you can unlock the characters that are in the banners, but you need like 200 tickets, and it's quite a lot of monetary investment to get that. And there's also costume gachas in that game that cost a fortune as well. So I think in comparison, I think this is actually quite good to you overall. So last thing I want to cover is any areas for improvement with NGS. So as I've said, I know I have been quite positive about NGS overall. I still feel there are some areas that do need improvement. And I feel the first one that SEGA needs to do is I think they need to listen to the community a bit more. So one example of that I can think of is with the dual quests. After the first dual quest was added, a lot of people gave very, very vocal feedback on social media and so on, expressing their displeasure with it, because it was felt that you had to use these special capsules to have a chance of beating the quests, which meant having to create entirely new sets of gear, which is very, very expensive and takes a lot of time. And a lot of people just didn't like it. So in a recent NGS headline, it was announced that they're adding another dual quest later on, which is going to be the same kind of deal again. So I feel that they're just not really listening to the community on that. There are certain areas where they have sort of backpedaled a bit and changed things based on community feedback, but I think that they do just need to, even if it's just a case of submit a survey every so often. I realise that there are occasionally surveys for NGS Headline, but I feel it would be nice if they would just send the players a survey every so often by email and just to collate the players' thoughts on the game. I just feel that little bit of involvement with the community would go a long way. Next thing is, I feel that the rollout of the creative space, I think, has been a bit too slow. So when it got added, we only had Alio-related things. We're getting Retem in an update sometime in the next couple of months. I can't remember when it is exactly. But we still won't have Kavaris. We still won't have Steer. And part of me just feels, how much effort would it be to just add the other areas in?
The live concert is on right now.
It will be interesting to see how the Alliance creative spaces go as well. Next thing is, personally, I would like to see the ability to more easily run like previous events. So, as I've mentioned previously, we had the Sonic event recently, and that was actually a really, really fun limited quest. I may be wrong, but I don't think you can do that anymore. Yeah, so now we've got this Nazoon's Big Quiz, which in itself is quite fun, but I don't think there's any way. Yeah, there's no way of running previous limited quests. And I think it would just be a really cool thing just to add it in as an option. Just give us the ability to run the previous ones, because it would just increase the amount of content that we've got. I appreciate it for like seasonal ones, fair enough. If it's like a Christmas theme one, yeah, fair enough. Just have it on at Christmas. But for things like the Sonic event, that was just a really good, fun, limited quest. I don't see why we just now can't run it. Can we not just bring it back as a quest we can do anytime? I just think it would be a no-brainer, really. So that's one area I would definitely say. One other area, and this does annoy me a bit with the game, is with story. So you have to go through story with every single character that you make. Now, they have recently added, if I can find it, I think it's in the Arts Cash shop. Yeah, so there is an item here called the NGS Story Progress Ticket. Costs 900 Arts Cash, which is not particularly cheap. I would probably price it about 500 instead, personally. And that allows your character to progress to the latest chapter of the storyline. Now, my question with this is, when they add another chapter, will your character automatically progress to that next one? Or will you then have to do another chapter? Or keep buying these tickets? Because that's a bit obnoxious if that's the case. My personal opinion is that I think that once you've completed a story quest on one character, I think you should just be able to skip it with the other characters. There's no real benefit to run them apart from the experience you get from them. It's not like you really have branching paths in the story or anything. There's a couple of dialogue decisions that you can make that differ a little bit, but it makes no real difference to the story at all. I just feel that once you've done it once, you should just be able to skip it on your other characters to save time, because it is annoying, particularly when you've got a lot of characters. For example, I've got 5 characters, so I have to do story 5 times every time there's a story update, and it gets really annoying. So that's one area, definitely. One other area, and this was also a problem in PSO2 as well, but it's the number of items in the game, and that might sound a bit weird. What I mean by it is materials. So they added a material storage for this, which is very expensive to unlock, I have to add. But you can see, this is my material storage. I'm just going to scroll down it now, just so you can see how many different material items there are in the game. This is just materials. Still going. And I'm sorry, but that is absolutely ludicrous. There is no need whatsoever for there to be that many material items in the game. I think particularly like the gathering items. So for example, why can't we just simplify it so we have a single type of vegetable for each region, a single type of meat for each region, a single type of fruit for each region? I don't see why there needs to be multiple different types. I know they give different boost effects and everything, but all they do is just clog your storage up. It's the same for... I'll just go to all storage. Things like the grinding items. There's a lot of these, and these you can't put in your material storage either, so these are stuck in your other storage. And again, there's just a lot of items that are... It could be simplified a lot, I believe. I just don't see why we need so many of these items. And again, for grinding items as well, most people are going to want to keep a big storage of gold prim swords, and gold prim sword 2s, and gold prim armors, and gold prim armor 2s. And again, they just clog your stash up. I just feel there needs to be a better solution for this, because it's just inventory management hell at the minute. I just don't enjoy it. Other than that, I think the game is in a pretty good place now. And just to conclude, I'm just going to quickly go through, do I personally believe that NGS is worth playing in 2023 in its current state? And my advice to that is, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a game to play as your main game, hours and hours a day, I would probably say no, just because the overall amount of content probably isn't conducive to playing it for hours and hours and hours. I personally see NGS as a game that I log onto it every day. I'll play it for an hour or two a day, and that's enough. And then I'll play it again for the same every day. And for that, I think NGS is a really, really fun game. There's enough to do to keep you occupied for that amount of time. It's really, really fun to play. The combat's fun. Despite what some people say, I personally think it's fun. And I feel that there is enough to sort of keep you occupied for a couple of hours a day. So I personally use it as a game to play alongside something else. And I personally think that's probably the best way to play NGS. Would I like to see more added to it? Of course I would. I want nothing but the best for this series. I love Phantasy Star Online, and I want nothing but the best for it. And I do feel like NGS is a game with a lot of potential that isn't necessarily fully realised yet, but I feel that SEGA are moving in the right direction with it. So overall, I would say that, I would say NGS is worth playing, as long as you bear in mind that it is a game that you probably just want to play for a couple of hours a day at most. Overall, as I say, the criticism it's been getting online, I think some of it is fair. I'm not going to say that this game is perfect, because it is by no means perfect. But I do feel that some of the criticism has been completely unfounded, and some of it is so overblown, it's ridiculous. Some of the criticisms I've seen have just been absolutely absurd, and I feel that the game needs to be shown in a fair light. If you'd have asked me to do this review shortly after launch, I would have probably been a lot more negative about the game, because, as I've mentioned previously, the game was in a very, very bad place at launch. It was terrible. But I feel SEGA have put a lot of effort in to try and improve the game over time. I do feel there are still a lot of areas for improvement, as I've said, but I feel we are at least moving in the right direction now with NGS, and hopefully over the next year or two, we'll get to a point where the game is absolutely flourishing and doing really well. So I think that's probably enough to cover this for this video, really. I know it's been a bit of a rambly and potentially a bit of a ranty video, but I just wanted to put out my honest opinion of how the game is at the moment, coming from someone who's played Phantasy Star Online since the beginning. And because of that, I can see why they make some of the decisions they have. Just to quickly touch on that, one example I've seen of some complaints is the lack of the just attack system in NGS. The just attack was a system where you had to time your attacks. I'm only going to touch on this very briefly, but I'm personally glad to see it gone. Reason for that is because all just attack was, in my opinion, is it was a relic left over from the original Phantasy Star Online, where you had to time your attacks to do a 3-hit combo. That then followed into later Phantasy Star games, and they kept on including it again. And I just don't see the real benefit for it. Yes, it discourages button mashing, but honestly, do we really care? I just don't feel like it's a really valid complaint, really. So, as I said, because I've played the original PSO a lot, I can kind of see why they included it in the following games after PSO, but I could also see why they've now got rid of it and want to move on and separate, sort of move away from the past a bit. So that's going to wrap up my review of the current state of PSO2 NGS. As I say, if you've got any comments at all about NGS or anything you want to discuss, just leave them in the comments. I realise this might be a very controversial topic for a lot of people, because there are some people that seem to be hell-bent on just shit-talking the game, and there are some people that seem to be just showering it with praise and not covering any of the negatives. So I wanted to give a good example of like my honest opinion of where I feel it stands, which is somewhere in the middle. So that's going to cover it for this video. Any questions, just leave them in the comments below, and I will try and answer what I can. But for the meantime, thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. And hopefully, next video we can move on to something a bit more positive. Thanks, guys. See you in the next one.